Yes. Yeah. So good evening all, and welcome to the Friday Fundamentals of Bombay Management Association. Very happy to welcome you all today for this session, which is a day before our Independence Day, and we are celebrating 75th Independence Day, and the celebrations have already started by Government of India, and I'm sure many of you may have recorded your national anthem to be posted on the sites of Government of India. So with this wishes and greetings on this auspicious day, I welcome you all for the Friday Fundamentals. And today we have with us Dr. Surya Narayan Iyer, who is has very illustrious career. Currently, he is with Oracle, and he has over 20 years of teaching, research, and thought leadership type of experience, and 27 years of corporate. While being in corporate like Oracle, Aditya Birla Group, he has been teaching along with that, and a lot of research and consultancy at his credit. And currently he is with Oracle with product strategy, evangelization, business consulting, application implementation, solution consulting, and digital HR and analytics strategy and change management. Today we have he is going to have for us a very interesting topic, which is very relevant and very contemporary, which is talking about the digital HR and applications and imperatives, where we will come to know the dynamics and the dimensions of digital HR, which is a very important function as far as the organizations are concerned. Sir, we have today with us corporates as well as some students members of Bombay Management Association, and we look forward to a very engaging and very informative session on this very contemporary topic of yours. So I welcome you once again and request you to start with the presentation. I request all the members to they can post their comments and their questions in the chat for Dr. Surya Narayan Iyer, and we will have the discussion after the presentation. So over to you, Dr. Iyer, and thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you, Dr. Kavita, and thank you, BMA, for giving this opportunity. I mean, it is really my privilege to be associated and be able to share. And I always believe this, that it is always about learning. I am going to share, and as the subject says, right, it is Friday Funda and Basic. So we will essentially have fundas here, but it's all about you also asking the questions and relating to the right fundas, right? So I will keep your questions coming, and I really learn from the questions that people ask. And that's how we build the combined knowledge, right? So thank you once again. See, what I intend to do in the next 1 hour is to give you a high-level view into the opportunities and imperatives that digital HR as a subject gives. Now, people will say, what is digital HR? I mean, how this has emerged now. So it's basically HR and technology together, but you all know, right, in the last 1.5 years, we've all been in a situation where digital is driving the way we work, right? So much so that HR now is re-looking at policies, re-looking at how people work together, how people collaborate, right? So it's an entire new paradigm that we're looking at, and hence, the time really to look at the new opportunities and the imperatives that come along with the subject. As Dr. Kavita ma'am said, I do bring in corporate experience, but I also bring in research. I'll try to use a combination of both my research as well as the practitioner perspectives, and I hope we make this very interesting. With that, let me quickly go into the first thing, which I actually wanted to start with a video. Right. It is an Oracle video. I'm not here to, I mean, it's not about promoting Oracle, but it's just an example that you could take. But this is an example of how life is changed for all of us. And I thought I'll start with this. Let me know if you're able to hear and see the YouTube video. It's an Oracle YouTube video. Sorry, the ad always starts. We'll have to live with this.
Voice is not there.
Is it not there or? One second. Give me a second.
Time reimbursement. That is absolutely right. The training program
Happening today.
You have 4 events today.
Imagine if technology adapted to you.
Is it okay now?
Since being promoted to regional sales manager, my mornings are off to a running
Yes, sir.
start. Oracle, tell me what's happening today.
You have 4 events today.
Who am I interviewing?
You are interviewing Steve Tomlinson at 4 p.m. today.
Oracle, tell me which color.
My favorite color is red.
I'll stick with white.
Are you gonna be at my game tonight?
Bet, kiddo. Time to go. Oracle, tell me what's next.
Would you like to continue reviewing Steve's resume?
Yes, where has he worked?
Steve has worked at Votive Computing and Hub Networks. You are about to reach your destination. Do you want to reserve an office?
Yes.
Office 320 has been reserved for you.
Do I have time to stop for a kombucha?
That will add 20 minutes to your arrival time.
All right. Oracle, start my day.
Welcome, Lisa Jones. The office is set to your preferences.
Oracle, open quarterly forecast.
Okay, here is the quarter's forecast.
Thanks, Rob. That's really great news. Nope, we'll send the documents over right away. No need to stay late. All right, take care. Oracle, start opportunity for Rob Barker.
Done. Would you like to review your meeting details?
Yes.
Here are the agenda items for the meeting. Quarterly forecast snapshot. Sales talking points. And by the way, it is Sally's birthday. Anything else?
Are all required attendees present?
All required attendees accepted.
Happy birthday, Sally. Thank you. Oracle, start my meeting.
cinnamon, paprika, and a number of other spices. You can also buy Moroccan spice blends pre-made if you want to.
Oracle, tell me what's left for today.
Would you like to review and submit your expense report?
Yes, submitted.
Done. Would you like to review and send the offer to Steve Tomlinson?
Yes, include a start date 3 weeks from now.
I submitted the offer and initiated the pre-hire checklist.
Mom, can we go to the beach tomorrow?
Oracle, what's tomorrow look like?
You have no meetings scheduled for tomorrow. The weather forecast is for sunny skies.
Sure, bud.
Yes!
All right, I hope you enjoyed the video and you saw the extent with which digital technologies have actually connected both work and life together. And we will see more of these examples and discuss the concepts around that. But before we get there, I mean, as the name suggests, let's go into the fundamentals, right? And if I put in the research hat, this is what research says. The opportunities that digital HR provides are basically of 3 categories. And it is all about achieving 3 levels of excellence. The first being the operational excellence, and that comes with any kind of digital automation, right? Digital automation helps you to automate processes, which essentially means that I have streamlined those processes. I have cut out non-value adding activities, thereby cutting costs and increasing value for the organization. That's the first objective of digital HR transformation. The second objective is, it's not about the HR department alone. It's not about reducing costs and improving process. It's also about empowering the employees. It's also about giving them that experience. It's also about giving them the platform to collaborate. And hence, how do we use digital technologies to build a relationship with the employee? How do you use technology to build that additional commitment of the employee? Engagement is an outcome of relational excellence. And the third one is what we move towards an entirely a performance excellence or a transformation excellence, where the organization moves from a current state to a future state, challenges the status quo, builds new capabilities for future. So hence it is about connecting the intellectual capital, which is our knowledge, skill, ability, the social capital, which is the behaviors and the extra role behaviors that people bring into table to be able to create a knowledge platform. Because it's very clearly, research says that more the knowledge exchange, higher is the firm performance. The entire objective is strategic in nature, aligned towards firm performance. And you would see each of these benefits that we're talking about, whether it is about streamlining processes, increasing productivity, cutting costs, increasing engagement, reducing absenteeism, building new capabilities, building a change-ready workforce, knowledge exchange, they are all correlated to firm performance. So eventually it is all about giving employees that experience and in turn being able to build firm performance in the organization, right? So that's the fundamental to the levels of digital HR. And hence the perspective hence are an operational perspective, which you see is a cost reduction, efficiency improvement. The next level is the relational perspective, which is about increasing the service responsiveness to the employee, right? Self-service is an example. Giving a portal, one-stop portal to an employee is an example. Creating a collaboration workspace where people can share knowledge, share documents, interact with each other, have a place for voice. That's the service responsiveness and the transformational perspective. So in effect, if we go back to the concepts of digital transformation, the first level is what I call digitization. And digitization is about moving from manual to automation. Some of the examples from a fundamentals point of view is, I used to have a manual recruiting system and I used to do advertisements in newspapers. Today, I'm able to do it online. Right? So this entire process of moving from manual advertisements to online recruiting services is an example of digitization. I used to have manual personal files 20 years back, right? I mean, in those days, we used to have personal files and a lot of organizations still have that. The entire process of digitizing those and bringing it into a softer form in a software version is another example of moving from manual to automation. But as I said, digitization is about cost reduction and efficiency improvement. It's still not experience. Experience comes when you put the system to use, when the digitalization happens, when I extend the systems as self-service to the people, when people take ownership. So it's not about having leave records on the system. It's about allowing people to apply for leave on the system. It's about allowing people to have visibility of various things on the system to be able to take decisions. It's about the visibility of the manager to be able to approve things online. So the more you adopt, the more you digitalize your organization. Now that's a fundamental difference between digitization and digitalization. Digitization is when you move manual to automation. But if you don't adopt it, if you do not put to use, the benefits of the digitization are not there. So digitalization is a process wherein you adopt those systems for accruing the benefits that are there. And the third one is building a new capability, right? So fundamentally changing the way we work. I used to do face-to-face interviews. Video interviews was never even a thought. Today, I've moved to video interviews. I've fundamentally changed the way I work. Earlier, we used to physically go to work and interact with people. Today, we have moved to a hybrid way of working. That's the fundamental transformation that we have gone through, because that's the future of work, a future hybrid workplace. And hence, the alignment of systems, processes, and the associated digital technologies that support them is what is a journey. And these are the three perspectives that go very importantly when we talk about a digital HR transformation. The entire process of moving from digitization to digitalization to digital transformation. These are some of the fundamentals, and I will brush through this, but this is to generally give you an idea of what I've been talking about till now. To say that the operational perspective talks about the cost reduction and the HR department's productivity, department's efficiency and productivity. And hence the scope is all about digitizing the employee records, the employee life cycle from hire to retire, payroll, benefits, time. And what do we benefit? It's about streamlining the processes, reduction of the HR middlemen. The speed of operation goes up, reduction of errors, and things that typically go with automation. Then it's about the relational perspective, where the objective is to increase the service responsiveness towards the employee. And here the scope comes to employee manager self-service, the entire E part of all the HR processes, and the collaboration through social networks. What are we moving towards? There it was HR productivity. Now we're talking about employee productivity. We're talking about employee satisfaction and happiness. We're talking about positive perceptions that people have as a part of the experience, as also a platform for voice and openness for employees. And then the third one is where we're talking about improving the HR strategic orientation. That's where we build organization towards future capabilities, right? So that's where we bring in knowledge management, digital innovation and transformation. What's the outcome? Creation of a change-ready workforce. Trust and shared values because of the transparency that you get, and the knowledge exchange in the firm performance that I was talking about. Now, given these fundamentals, and I know there are corporates here, there are students here, and I would like to make it applicable to everybody. I believe, and my research, gone through a lot of it into it, and I've actually brought this into saying that the journey of digital transformation in any organization has to have three imperatives. One is the change imperative. So the change imperative is about assessing ourselves to say, how ready are we to change, right? The world has got a lot of options available. The opportunities for technology is high. People day in and day out come and show you various things. And always there is that temptation to say, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. Well, yes, we all want to do that. But the aspect is to know, first of all, what's the opportunity. Number two, to assess my own readiness as an organization, and then probably design to say where the change is required. So that's the first part, to say design and define where change is required. The second is, once you've decided that, then you bring in the execution imperative. So execution is all about thinking what is relevant to my organization, contextualization of those change and opportunities that you have for the organization, and going through this entire execution piece. And that clarity on execution is very important. And I'm not talking about project management here. Project management is a part of it, but this is more around identifying clearly, what are the outcomes that as an organization I'm looking for. It's very important to operationalize the outcomes that we're looking at. And once you know what those outcomes are, then it's about sustenance of it, right? You can implement a system, but a system is the realization of benefits of a system as good as its adoption. And hence, what goes into adoption? What is the role of an individual in adoption? What is the role of the organization in adoption? What are those sustainable initiatives that are required for driving right adoption? So a digital HR transformation in real sense is not about just appreciating technologies that are available in the market, but is also about driving these three buckets: the change imperative, execution imperative, and the adoption imperative. I'll quickly take you through each one of these, 10 to 15 minutes of each of these, and then we can go into the question answer. So the first is the change imperative, right? So when we're talking about change imperative, it's important for us to understand what's actually changing around in the world. There are four things, according to me, that are changing. The first thing is, whether we like it or not, we are working in a multi-generation workforce. I come from, when I started my career, there were only 3 generations at work. I passed out of my post-graduation. That was the first generation at work. Then there was the middle management, the people from the 30s to the 40s, 45s, who are the people who are running the actual business, the operational managers, the supervisory people, that part of it, and a part of the senior management leadership, which was running that. And then there was a third generation, which was handing it over to the newer generation and retiring into it. But now there are 5 generations at work, and that's the reality. The 17-somethings and the 80-somethings are doing startups, and they're doing it real good. People have gone into gainful employment right when they start college. And people beyond 60 are also continuing, thanks to all the advantages in medical science and technologies. The life expectancy has gone up. The fitness mindset of people has gone better. And hence, and obviously the economics around sustenance and survival is forcing people to continue beyond 60. So we have 5 generations at work, right? And hence, how do you use, and obviously when you have 5 generations at work, the processes that drive how people work across these generations and the digital technologies, right? I mean, part of these are digital natives, right? And part of them are digital immigrants, correct? People like me are digital immigrants. And I'm sure the current generation, the students that we have in this audience are people who are digital natives. How do digital natives and digital immigrants work together using these digital technologies becomes the other part. The second thing, and this is another very important aspect that is changing around, is the career patterns. In earlier days, people used to join organizations and probably retire from that organization. The amount of effective commitment that was there at display was much higher. And there was effective commitment at the organization level. Today, effective commitment is moving towards the job. As long as organizations invest in job enrichment, in modern technological things that is giving the employee the essence of learning in that particular job, they love their jobs, they would probably go there. And so people follow jobs, no longer stay in organizations, they stay with their jobs. So, and hence, if you see, actually, the average job tenure is now 4.2 years, right? So it's tenure at an organization level. But what I like to do, what I want as a passion, that continues. The third one is the rise of the blended workforce. And this actually is a context that goes along with this to say that when people do this kind of a thing, then they are ready to go as gigs. I love my job. I have passion for what I do. As long as I get it in 1 place, 2 places, 3 places, 4 places, I don't care. So people are now moving into gig form of engagements, and hence to that extent, the digital platforms that support them is very important. These systems that work out the physical employment contracts as well as the psychological employment contracts that go with the gig workforce is also something that is very interesting. That's changing. And last is a work-life balance. And you had actually seen the video. The video was all about work-life balance, right? Technology has completely gone into the work and life. So much so that, you know, there is actually no difference between work and life. And there is a lot of concepts, like people say, there is no difference between work and life. As long as you have passion for your work, as long as you love your work, you're actually living your life. So go back to that point of passion. So, but at the same time, from an HR point of view, it is important that there are those contracts, that physical contracts, as well as the employment contracts, as well as the psychological contracts that need to be looked at. And hence, to that extent, the work-life balance and its associated enablement through digital technologies becomes very important. On the technology side, right, there are far more things that are happening. We are now moving towards the world of being connected. So you saw that, right? I mean, from the mobile, she could approve an expense. From the mobile, she could actually raise an offer. She did an interview evaluation from there. So much so that we are now saying that I'm at work. Can I know, sitting at office, whether my child came back from school and is safely into the home, right? So it's about putting a camera there outside and digitally connecting to your mobile phone, and you actually being able to monitor, say, well, I'm at home, I'm at office, but I know my child has gone home. She's safe and secure. Right? It's about connecting machines. It's about a world of connecting everything. The second one is the march of machines. The use of artificial intelligence is increasing. Right? So, and you know, there's a lot of research happening on this. There are pros and cons of artificial intelligence, but I mean, I'm a researcher at heart, and I would only say, for a researcher, triangulation is a very important thing, right? Anything that I need to prove as an evidence, any hypothesis that I need to establish, or hence, if I bring it to a practical life, it's about taking a decision, right? Decisions are about making an assumption, assessing your assumptions, looking at your options, and taking a decision. In research, it's about the hypothesis, testing your hypothesis, and giving an inference. Whenever we do that, we need multiple sources of evidence to triangulate and form a decision. Artificial intelligence, in my opinion, is a very strong triangulation tool. So while I will use my gut intuition and my experience to take a decision, I will also use intelligence that comes from the machine to be able to tell me, because the technologies are actually building a lot of cognitive intelligence into the machines. And with every day, the machine is learning faster and faster. And in the triangulation, the gap between a human decision and a machine decision is going on reducing as we speak. But then it's a debate, and so whether artificial intelligence should be completely relied on. As I said, I would use it for triangulation. The third one is into the cloud, and this is largely a cost paradigm, but it is also a core competency paradigm. I mean, in a large organizations actually used to have their own server farms. They used to manage technology, and there used to be an entire system. And while their business was something else, which was to be a cement business or a financial services business or a consulting business, but then there was an entire section which was managing infrastructure and technology. Today, that is completely outsourced and into the cloud. So it helps people to focus on the core competency, which is running the main business, and leave this to the experts, number one. And number two, obviously, with the economies of scale that go along with this, there's a cost paradigm that goes when it comes to the cloud. The last, and this is one of the most important thing, right? I mean, if you actually saw that video, it was practically connecting everything, personal information, professional information, organizational intelligence, everything together to be able to do a work-life balance. Obviously, then security becomes very important. And security is of two types. One is your intelligence of your data, intelligence of the organization assets, digital assets. The other is security of my own individual personal data, right? I mean, I'm an employee and I have my personal data. We wouldn't want personal data to be put to wrong use. So this is about data privacy, and it is about information security. And that a lot of investment is happening in this area. And right, I mean, there's a whole lot of discussion in recent times that have been happening around information security, right? So these are things that technology is looking at. Now, when we put this together from a digital HR transformation, what are those tectonic shifts that we are seeing, right? So there are six tectonic shifts that we are seeing. Number one, and I will explain each of these to you. Number one is we're moving away from enablement to experience. And I'll give you an example of this. When I said enablement, suppose somebody is being transferred, and I'm giving you an example to do this, and we can do that with more examples. Suppose I'm moving one person from one location to the other location. It's a transfer. In an enablement, you would actually provide all information to the employee and say, this is a transfer policy, go read it. This is the new office that you're going, this is the address, go find it. And probably we would open a help desk and say, you can call on these numbers if you need any help. Now that's enabling me with all the resources that are required. But I'm just shifting this now, and I'm telling you, a person is being transferred from one location to the other location. Say I'm being transferred from Mumbai to Calcutta. Now the system is going to use machine learning and artificial intelligence as also my personal data to tell me, oh, you know what, you're moving to Calcutta, that's fine. Most of our colleagues that will work with you live in this area. So between the office and this neighborhood, the nearest house that we can suggest to you based on your based on your salary, based on your saving potential and your preferences, these are the kinds of flats that we can look for. I know you have a 9-year-old kid and a 5-year-old kid. So the nearest school is so and so. These are the set of people you can get in touch with for their school admission. You are a Gujarati. I know you're going to Calcutta. The nearest Gujarati cuisine from this point where we are talking about is so and so. Now, I mean, these are just examples. Now, this is basically a proactive nudge. And that is what is called experience. So it's not about a transaction of a transfer. It is now an experience of a mobility. So we are entirely moving, and this is where technology is moving towards. So technology is moving from enablement to experience. And we can do that. I mean, I'm a first-time mom. So the entire joys of motherhood, preparing an individual for motherhood, rehabilitating individuals after they come back, returning women. So all that is an experience, and it's an end-to-end experience that we're talking about. And HR actually does that. I mean, trust me, it's not that HR was never doing it. HR has already done that, but it was outside the purview of digital technologies. Now, digital technologies today, because we are able to integrate this, are we able to give this kind of a life event experience that we talk about. The second is analytics. Now, this is related. I mean, one of the examples that I gave ahead was right? I mean, it's analytics. Analytics was giving you information. It gave you trends. It said, what's the attrition? What's the number of top talent in your organization? What's the gender diversity in your organization? And we went on doing that. And now we are moving towards saying, can I use machine learning? Can I use artificial intelligence to give me prescriptive nudge? Analytics assumed that the questions you asked and the hypothesis that you made was trusting the managerial cognition. It said, the managers have the capability to write the right questions. And as long as the questions the managers ask are answered, then analytics has done its job. But we are moving away from that. It's about saying that, well, your manager asked these 5 questions, but I'm seeing a pattern here, which your manager is not even looking at. So these proactive insights and nudges are possible using artificial intelligence and machine learning. And that's why we're moving towards. And the third, and hence the offshoot of that is whether it was enablement or analytics, which used to be on demand, now it is proactive. So these nudges that I explained to you, and I can go on, I mean, we have paucity of time, I have to do that in 1 hour. We can actually pick up every example. You pick up recruiting as a process, you pick up talent management as a process, learning as a process, compensation as a process, employee experience engagement as a process. Everywhere you can actually have use cases and examples of how you can actually shift a perspective from on demand to proactive. And then say, okay, these are the digital technologies I can use as an enabler to help me move from an on-demand situation to a proactive. Come to the fourth one, right? We're talking about integrated. So the earlier architecture, this is a little technical, but pardon me for this, but you will understand this in the context of what we do. So, in organizations, we always used to have this, I've gone for this module for performance management. I've gone for this module for employee records. I've gone for this module for recruiting. We work with this vendor for learning. And then we said, okay, technologies can integrate. And well, technology was and is there to integrate all these kinds of islands of systems and islands of information. But then we are now moving towards saying, well, it more than integrated, I think it has to be embedded. So I will give you an example of what an embedded means. When I'm doing a salary fitment for a new hire, if I'm trying to hire someone, I'm doing a salary fitment. What we will do, we'll say, okay, I want to know what's the min max of the grade and the max of the grade. Fair enough. That is something that is available to you at the job requisition level itself. Now you say you put a fitment, but you also want to know if I fit this person, how does this person fit in from a parity point of view, organizational parity, market parity, department parity. Now this, if you wanted this, they'll say, oh, go into an MIS system, download a report, look at that report and do. Now this is an example of integrated. Embedded is, you will be able to have that intelligence that I just spoke about at the transaction itself. Now, you can have n number of examples, and as I said, we can keep discussing that. But then pick out examples where you say, I want to move away from integrated to building intelligence and embedded it right at the transaction I'm doing it. Right? So hence, this entire thing now moves away. UI is user interface for people who would not know. So a friendly user interface was to say, it should be very attractive, it should be friendly, the number of clicks should be less, the navigation should be easy. So that is one way of access. But you actually see the lady on the video actually didn't use any UI. She had everything on her mobile. And it is so simple that you actually don't need a UI. So the entire world is saying that let's not make UI a subject at all. Let's go into no UI. It should be completely foolproof. And therefore, the entire thing together is saying that I'm no longer using artificial intelligence in its technical term. I'm contextualizing it, I'm personalizing it, and making it adapt. Right? So if you saw that video, there was so much of personalization in that. Right? Somebody's birthday was there. Proactively, it was informed, and the boss could actually use personalization and personally wish that. So that is personalization from the point of view of an experience that you give. The other is, you go to an Amazon, you go to the various the Flipkarts of the world. It will always say, what, based on your persona, based on what you're buying now, these are the other things that you can buy. Right? Now, this is what is happening in our HR systems also. It says, you are a persona, you are leadership, you are top talent, you've been in the organization for so and so years. Your next career jump is probably this. And hence, depending on your specific persona, this is a recommended development path for you. These are the recommended learning paths, learning programs for you. These are the recommended mentors that you can work with, or these are the recommended coaches that you can work with who will relate to you and help you in that. So that's where adaptive comes into picture. It's about entirely personalization and how we use digital technologies to that. So summary, if you actually look at all the 6 tectonic shifts, it's about giving individuals the experience. And hence I've said it's all about the experience economy. I'll go a little further. I'll just, this is an example actually. I mean, you can, if you want, you can have a look at it. This is actually a recruiting experience where right, that's the point that I said. It was all about experience, right? And you look at the entire applying experience. You had a bot who was contextually answering the applicant. That's the first piece. Then you had the entire application where seamlessly this person could import the LinkedIn profile and then apply. Simple. So it's all about experience, and the researchers in this would know, right? The applicant perceptions of distributive justice, procedural justice, and interactive justice as a part of the hiring process goes a long way in determining the withdrawal cognition. So there is a lesser withdrawal cognition and a longer time commitment of the employee within the organization. And this is very important, and hence the experience economy that I said. So I gave you an example of experience economy, application of experience economy in recruiting. You can do that for careers, you can do that for performance, you can do that for compensation, you can do that for training and development, and there is no end to it. You can go that for gamification within the organization. All right, so hence it all comes back to the HR opportunity, right? And to me, the stakeholders are 3, right? There are 3 stakeholders in this entire thing. There is people, and I define people as employees, managers, leaders, suppliers, customers, because as a system, you are just not talking about employees or your managers. You're also talking about your suppliers, customers, partners. Reason being, they are also equal stakeholders in this entire process. And I will tell you an example. There are some organizations who are now moving towards customer-centric HR, and their definition of customer-centric HR is, can the customer have a say in defining the job description of the employee? So the customer decides what is expected out of the employee, and that we are moving to the next level of customer service. Can the customer be invited to do the performance appraisal of an employee? Now, I'm just giving a thought. There are some organizations who are already attempting this. So hence, it's just not surprising that the customers, suppliers, partners are an integral part of an HR system. Then comes the machines, and machines are of 2 types, right? The applications. So the Oracle HR systems that you would see, the machines that are there, the mobile devices, sensors, everything is called machine. And the third is data. And data is your internal data, which is all about these records, lifecycle transactions, all that we do. Also the external data, right? My social media data, competitive benchmarks, customer data, supplier data, partner data, all of that data. So the entire opportunity for us is to actually bring this together. So the entire thing is about people to machine, people to people. So how do we connect these integrated threads? And because there are processes in between, and how do you define your processes that help connecting people to machines, people to people, and machine to machine, right? So I'll give you some examples of this, and then we'll come back to that video. So when I say I'm connecting people to machine, it goes back to the relational transformation, relational perspective that I spoke about. It's about saying, can I allow employees access and interaction with the system. So all these aspects that we see today, and this is something which is very mature from a digitalization point of view. The employee portal, the employee self-service, right? All of these integrations which people have access to the underlying HR process is something which is an example of people to machine. Now, this is an area where a lot of organizations have done a lot of advancement, and this is fairly a very mature perspective that I see in the market today. The second one, and this is where there is more work to do, and particularly in the context of a paradigm, the pandemic, this is becoming even more. How do you use digital technologies to connect people to people? So it's about saying that, can I amplify the entire employee services? How do I create those collaboration and communication channels? So I'm talking to you today through the Zoom platform, right? I mean, 2 years back, this was always thought about as saying, oh, we will do virtual also. I mean, from a verge of saying we'll do virtual also to saying that virtual becomes a way of life. And I mean, even within my own work system, I mean, Oracle, last 1.5 years, I have not gone to office even once. And my customers have also not called me. They are also happy talking to me in a virtual mode. I am also happy doing it the way I'm doing it because it ensures my safety. It saves a lot of my time. I mean, I'm in Mumbai, and the amount of 4 hours that I used to spend on the road today, I'm able to give it to my family. My me time. So there are advantages to this. There are disadvantages to this, but it surely has created a new opportunity for us. We've done entire implementations. I mean, we have had customers start an digital HR transformation exercise during the pandemic, and we've gone live during the pandemic without even going to their office even once. It's been possible, right? So it's all about anytime, anywhere connectivity and the amount of data sharing that we do, right? And this is a great opportunity that the world is encashing on. The third opportunity is about machine to machine, and here is where we're talking about analytics, right? See, how do you use data for decision making? So the examples of, and people would typically come and tell you this, the COE dashboards, or the predictive analytics, big data, data lakes, all these things that you hear actually fall under this bracket. Now, in this area, there is a lot to be done, right? I mean, primarily because people don't trust their own data. There are data issues in terms of completeness, data issues in terms of accuracy, and obviously timeliness, right? So there are challenges here, and if you look at analytics, there are 3 levels, right? I'm not going there, but at a higher level, we were talking about 3 levels, right? The descriptive analytics, which gives you the current state. Then we're talking about the causal analytics or the diagnostic analytics, which also talks about the why and the how and the questions that are answered. And the third one is the predictive descriptive part. A lot of organizations are mature from a descriptive analytics point of view, but I would believe that there is work to do when it comes to causal analytics and the prescriptive and predictive analytics. The last one, which is again very interesting, it's about connecting machine to people, right? I mean, I said we connected people to machines. So it was human beings we connected to applications. But now it's about connecting machines to people. So what is this? This is about the bot. You saw there was a bot, right? I mean, the first video that I started, it kept saying, Oracle, can you do this? Oracle, can you do this? Or the other words, you can say, Alexa, can you do this, right? So it's about the Alexas of the world or the Oracles of the world, which are these are the bots, right? Now, there are various types of bots. There's a process bot, chat bot. I'm not going to the definition of these, but primarily there are 3 applications that we're looking at. And this is where the use of artificial intelligence is the best. Process bots are, wherever there's a repetitive HR process, you can have, manual intervention is not so much required. Then you probably can go ahead and give it to the machines. The chatbots is an example that you see, in the first video, as well as the recruiting video that I shot were examples of chatbot, where there's an FAQ-based service desk, and you can train the machines. And as the transaction goes on increases, the machine gets trained better and better, and the personalization and contextualization of the answers must become better. The third one is an area where there's a lot of work happening, cognitive machines, right? So candidate shortlisting or identifying top talent, predictive employee engagement, mood assessment. There's a lot of investment that is happening in this area. I wouldn't say we have reached perfection there, but there is certainly movement that is happening around that. And this is the opportunity. So from an opportunity point of view, this clearly is an opportunity for the world to move towards the machine to people connections. So I'm quickly moving away from this to say, so from an opportunity point of view, you very clearly saw that there are fundamentally a lot of these opportunities, the 6 tectonic shifts that we spoke about, and digital transformation is absolutely contextual from the pandemic point of view, hence. But then, as I said, it's not about identifying. So it's about the readiness part, right? I mean, what am I ready for? So the question was, can I do mood assessment of an employee? The point is not, can I do mood assessment? The point is, as an organization, are we ready to accept the results of the mood assessment and make the changes? So is the leadership, is the organization ready to let go certain parts of life and allow the machine to take over? Now, that's a fundamental thing that goes into the change part. Now let's move to the execution part, where the execution again, and I'm quickly running you through the same thing that I spoke earlier. The digital imperatives, again, if you see, are 3 parts: the operational part, the relational part, and the transformation part. What I want to do at what point in time? Should I start with operational excellence and do relational and transformation later? Or should I start with operational and relation together and look at transformation later? Or should I do everything together? As I said, is something that is contextual to the organization, and the skills, the mindset, and the change readiness to, and that's where the execution comes into picture. But let me quickly run you through some of the things that you can look at. So when I talk about operational excellence, and from an execution point of view, we're essentially saying that, I need my demographic and employee profile in place. That's a fundamental thing too. So everything at the same place I want, and that's an execution paradigm. To say my design should be such that I bring everything at the same place. But at the same time, there are organizations and there are conglomerates, right? I mean, there are a lot of organizations, and you might be conglomerates, which have multiple businesses. And across these businesses, the processes could be different. Now, the choice is with the organization to say, am I going to allow different processes across the different businesses? Or am I going to say, well, for certain processes, there has to be an organization-wide standard. For the rest of it, I will allow organizations or businesses to do on their own. Now, this is the execution imperative. This is a design imperative. So any digital transformation has a design imperative to it. And these are the questions that we should ask ourselves. So here's an example. I'm saying organization-wide, all jobs should be evaluated on the same platform. Structure has to be integrated for fungibility of top talent. Performance management processes have to be same. Rewards management processes have to be same. Leadership development has to be same. Why? Because I want to give that signature experience of the organization. But when it comes to, say, leave processes, when it comes to, say, payroll processes, or say recruiting processes, which may depend on the industry, then you might probably want to keep it different, right? So that is what it says, that unique business level, you will have space for in-group differentiated identity. So can I have different processes for payroll, recruiting, onboarding, learning, whereas organization-wide, I keep these processes common. Now, these are examples. I'm not specifying that these should be common and they should be differentiated at business level. I'm giving you an example to say the design is extremely important if your digital HR transformation has to be successful, right? So the trade-off between one size fits all and configurable process, right? And then the third one is to say how much of automation I really want to do. And also, then once I do the automation, should I actually go at a group level and create a shared services, or should I allow businesses? So should experience be a common subject across the organization, or should experience be an individual business level experience? Now that is a design consideration that is very important. So because you need a foundation for a signature experience and better responsiveness to employee. So, I mean, this is just an example. I mean, I just put it as a screenshot of an application to say, actually, if you see here, and this is a common profile. And this is something, looks so simplistic, but from an execution point of view, organizations struggle actually, right? At one place, you have the full profile of the employee, whether it is their goals, their skills and qualification, their career development, their performance, everything at the same place. You keep clicking on each of this and it goes on. I mean, so I'm not here to do demo, but it's just to give you an example saying that the execution imperative talks about a design which gives you a holistic view at single place, single source of truth. Then comes the relational experience, where I'm saying that I need to move away from basic self-service to an intuitive, personalized self-service, which is digitally assisted. And I spoke about it, right? I mean, UI is moving into conversational UI. The bots are an example of conversational UI. It's about guided navigation. Gone are the days when people, I used to have an entire session of enablement whenever you used to build a new system to train people on navigation. And people understanding navigation were put at a higher pedestal than people who actually had the content. And that's not so fair. So then we said, I think the world should move towards saying, can we make self-service completely contextual? Right? And I'll show you an example of that. Because to me, responsiveness and employee ownership of data is very important. Because only when there is ownership of data by the employee, there will be accuracy of data. Only when data is used continuously and people see the what's in it for me, that is when the data will become okay. So that is where the one-stop portal. So hence the portal is required, because the more difficult the system is to access, the lesser will be the adoption. The lesser the adoption, the lesser is the data that gets collected, and the data completeness, the data accuracy, and the data timeliness. Right? So that's the relationship piece, to say the first step towards building a relationship with the employee is to actually give the employee the ownership of the data. Because then that creates an employee identity. That creates a place for a collaboration platform where people can put in their voice. Correct? And that's then hence believes that leads towards employee engagement and advocacy. So I was talking about this, and this is where the experience I'm talking about. We're moving away from transactions to life events. Has to be guided, contextual, action-oriented, and digital. So whatever is it, I mean, marital status change, new dependent joining the organization, joining the family, and hence being entered in the organization database, whether it is wellness related, life cycle related, everything. I give you the example of the maternity. Actually, I wanted to show you an example of a guided navigation, right? So here is an example where, the manager is wanting to transfer someone. I'll give you an example of 2 ways how you can actually make transfer as a great experience. So here's a manager experience. The manager wants to transfer someone. Now, instead of telling this manager the entire navigation, it's actually asking you a question. What do you want to do? Right? So the Simon Gilbert says, I want to transfer. So then there are a new set of questions. Another contextualization now starts. You say, okay, you want to transfer. So tell me, what is the transfer date? Who are you transferring? Why are you transferring? And what is the reason why you're making this? Right? So you can have more questions to it. What will be the question that is contextual to the. Then you are saying the details, from which business unit to which business unit, which department to which business unit. Is there a change in title? So all those are questions, right? And then you go ahead, and this is the life experience. What are these tasks that are required for the employee to do? So you're identifying the tasks which are pre-allocated, and it is done. So there is no navigation that a person has to remember. And this is one example of a complete experience. The another example, which is AI, machine learning driven as well as bot. And this is another example I wanted to show you quickly. So here is a case where an employee is getting transferred, and this is the employee view. Now a bot, a digital assistant, is talking to the employee for a transfer. This is not a conversational experience. Now, how can I help you? So actually, see here, there is a video also, there's audio. I put the audio off. Yes, I want to relocate. Now it's asking, where are you relocating? Now the questions are all being very contextual, you see. So I'm moving to Hong Kong. Are you locating permanently or temporarily? It's permanent. How long is the assignment? 5 years. So now immediately when you say 5 years, it's asking about the relocation packages. Now the policy comes into picture. In the older days, the policy was a PDF document and somebody had to go read a 10-page public PDF document. Whereas here, it gives you the snippet. Not only that, it allows you to do the transaction. Now here, I'm taking a pause here to say here, this is the business intelligence. This is the example that I was giving you earlier. Our record says that you have 2 daughters aged 5 and 9. Here are the closest schools that are there. Now this is that plus experience that HR used to give, but now digitally also possible. Do you need help finding accommodation? And then you're talking about the other 3 nearest property search sites that you can look for. Now I want to apply leave. Right? So you don't need to go to any transaction. You can actually apply for leave here itself. So the leave policy comes here. It allows you to take leave actually, and it says to you, right, 10 leaves available in the system. Now the bot is allowing and helping you apply for the leave also. So in a nutshell, it's all about bringing the transaction, the data, the contextualization using the artificial intelligence, and being able to give all of that experience at one single place, which is a digital assistant. Right? So I'm stopping this in the interest of time, but this was just to give you an experience two ways, right? A manager had a guided navigation, an employee has a conversational experience, right? So the third one, as I said, is a transformational experience, and where we are saying that I use the system to build the next generation. So how do you build a healthy in-house leadership pipe? How do you identify succession readiness? How do you build group-wide talent fungibility? And there are systems to do that, right? And obviously the analytics that I spoke about, the data-driven decision-making and actionable insight. Now, I know there is less time and I'm not going into this, but quickly, actually, you know, if you see here, and I will run through a particular set of screenshots to give you an idea of what integrated talent management is and how we build those skills, right? So technology through analytics is telling me what is my current position of competency analysis. Based on this, I have the entire profiles of all my people at the same place. I want to create a leadership pool, right? I want to identify my top talent, and I want to create a future leadership pool. And if I want to do that, I have all my people, the competencies, the skills, the behaviors, everything here. The comparison is right there. I identify whom I want, assess them on my performance, on potential, the risk of loss, right? The impact of loss, their talent score on the 9-box, and then plot them on the 9-box. Not only can I plot them on the 9-box, I also can move them into talent pools, into an emerging leader pool, or I can move them into a succession plan and create an entire succession plan around that, link it to a development plan, right? So this is how you link it to a development plan, where I say I go, and the traditional 70-20-10 is a model that you can use. So you can actually attach projects to this individual for the on the job. You can do feedback through the collaboration platforms and elicit feedback in forms of, that's a 20 piece, and obviously link it to a learning management system, which takes care of the 10 part. So I mean, the idea is not to do a demo of these systems. The idea is to essentially say, it's all about how you look at your design, right? So I showed you designs of how you can do employee experience. I showed you design of how you can bring all employees at the same place. I showed you design of how you can do superior analytics. And I also showed you an example of how we can integrate the entire talent management into a single process, because it is that is the design that is important. And when I talk about the execution imperative, it's about the design. And in the design, it's about identifying those processes that I need to change. That's the biggest change management. Readiness to be able to change the processes to suit the new age realities, as well as the opportunities that the digital systems allow you. That becomes extremely important, right? So I'm moving quickly on this. The last piece in my session is about the adoption imperative. And I'll bring in a lot of my research angle to this. And adoption is technology adoption, innovation adoption has always been a very interesting topic that has always been discussed. And there are two dimensions to an adoption. One is, as an individual, how do you create systems, design systems, implement systems that create a larger what's in it for me for an employee. And the more you do that, the better will be the adoption. But then adoption, but then the problem with only looking at individual adoption is that people then say, oh, you know what, usage of the system is adoption. So usage of the system is not only adoption. Usage of the system will say, I went into the system 10 times. I did 50 clicks, right? I mean, a lot of people actually go and say, how do you measure adoption? They'll say, let's look at how many people have accessed the system. How many people have accessed it through mobile? How many people have access through desktop? Well, they are measures of usage. They are not measures of adoption, because there is a difference between intention to use and actual use, actual adoption. And hence organizational parameters comes into picture. Because if you go back to the fundamentals of, in HR, we talk about signaling, right? And the processes that is designed, the policies that we design are in way a signaling. I mean, when I talk HR concept, it's basically a signaling, right? So technology also has a signaling. The way we design our technological systems, the way we use systems, the way leadership walks the talk in terms of usage of the system, the way decisions are made using technology, right? I mean, how many times it happens that you have a very dedicated, we have a perfect recruiting system, you do everything there, but then you suddenly find one very good candidate and you hire them outside the system. The moment you do that, the trust in the system goes down. You'll have a great career and succession planning system. You do everything there. But eventually the person gets promoted. If that person was not a slated successor on the system, the trust of people in that system will go away. So it's about the organizational adoption of this system that defines an individual's adoption of the system, the individual's trust in the system. It's a very important paradigm, and I use two models to actually talk about it. The technology acceptance model, and there are various models, right? There is diffusion of innovation, there is UTUAT, and there are multiple acceptance models, but eventually the fundamental is this: to say that any time you design a system, we are not, when we are bothered about intention to use, our actual thing is the actual usage behavior. How do you measure usage to the context that I talked about? And it very clearly says that people would derive an intention to use only if they have a perceived usefulness and a perceived ease of use, fundamentally. And what is perceived usefulness? Research says the degree to which a person believes that using a particular system would enhance his or her job performance. So that what's in it for me to say, if I use this digital HR performance system, my job performance will go up. So hence it's important to identify those specific outcomes that are related to job performance, evangelize it with the people, make them believe that this is how it is, do longitudinal studies and say job performance before, job performance after, and triangulate that and establish a perceived usefulness. Similarly, the perceived ease of use, and this is more of the UI front, to say that I may find it useful, but if it is too much of effort, I will still not use it. So there are two things to this. One is it useful to me? The second is, yeah, it is useful to me, but is it too much of effort? Right. Now go back to expectancy theory, right? We've spoken about instrumentality and valence, very similar to that. I would do something, I would be motivated to do something if I see value in it. But then it has to have an instrumentality in terms of lesser effort and more benefit, right? So it actually relates back to our HR theories. These are very, very similar, but research very clearly brings out this. And when we design systems, it's important for us to look at both perceived usefulness and perceived ease of use. There are various other, this construct itself is defined by various other sub-constructs, but I'm not going into it. But I fundamentally wanted to say that, acceptance and adoption is a function of individuals' perceived usefulness and perceived ease of use. So when we design the system, and then when we use the system, it has to be reflective of this. Now, the organization view, right? As I said, it's all about value. Organization invests crores of rupees, right? Now, when you invest so many crores of rupees, everybody wants value, and value is defined in three parameters: efficiency, effectiveness, service responsiveness. Efficiency, everybody, I mean, I'm not here to define that, but it's the tangible stuff, to say that with the same, can I do more? Effectiveness, I was doing things earlier this way, can I do it differently? And then service responsive, how responsive has my organization been? So to say that I have to empirically, with evidence, establish realization of the outcome through the adoption. And this is my own research. This is actually the model that I put forth as a part of my thesis. And we actually studied multiple organizations, and we came with 4 factors, right? The one was leadership focus. So the leadership's walk the talk is important. And I know one organization where somebody went and told, sir, we want to start a new business, and these are the 500 people that we want to hire. So the boss said, why are you giving me this piece of paper? Why can't you show it on the system to me and show me what's your current talent profile and how are the existing talent people whom we can move to the new business? Why should we hire everybody from outside? So immediately the answer same, oh sir, don't trust it, that data is not accurate. The boss said, I spent crores of rupees, we had a vision, I am not going to see any piece of paper. Whatever I will see will be on the system, and whatever decision I take will be on the system. Trust me, in 15 days, the system was corrected. That's leaders walk the talk. Now that is a very important aspect. So that's the signaling that I said. It is important for the leadership to give a signal about the seriousness of adoption. The second is the social climate. The trust, shared values, and languages. Very important. I gave you the example of succession plans. You do all the succession plans, you create all the transparency of the system, you do all the development plans. But eventually, if you do a successor outside the system, then people lose trust. Absolutely gone. Then we spoke about the bot, right? The bot is as good as the algorithms and the processes behind it. So the organization has to first have a service mindset to define processes that are aligned to be service mindset related, that will eventually call into the design. I spoke about the system strength, right? I mean, this is a signaling. The way it is put to use, the change management processes that we used, the continuous communication that is used becomes the other piece. And the last one is the capability. Whether we like it or not, and HR people, I'm also an HR professional, but whether we like it or not, when it comes to business and strategic HR acumen, when it comes to digital and technology acumen, when it comes to research and analytics mindset, there is a lot that we still have to achieve. And that has come as another very important point, that organizational adoption of digital HR technologies is done better, and the realization of outcomes are better when the line manager and the HR manager's capability in these three areas is much better. So these are some of the things that becomes adoption imperatives. I mean, this is a subject in itself, and we can go on, and there are specific things, but at an overall level, adoption is a function of these two very important things. So hence, there are these 4 roles, new roles that HR needs to now look at, right? The HR role in the context of adoption itself is changing. The HR is an evangelist who is continuously driving adoption, who is looking at outcomes and is looking at value. No longer we are going into saying, oh, the system is very good, it will create a great employee experience, and then there is no justification. The justification has to be driven at an adoption level, at specific outcome levels, and specific value of efficiency, effectiveness, and service responses. So obviously it can't be done unless and until we look at transformation. So we can't talk about not done here. It has to be out of the box. Transformation can happen only when we have disruptive business models and are ready to let go. If we have to rely on 100% video interviews and no face-to-face interviews, then the mindset of letting go has to be there. If you want to allow bots to take over the payroll processes, the mindset to let go has to be there, right? And that's where the disruptive part comes in. And then everybody has to be a researcher at heart, because it is a data-driven reality that we're talking about. And if we want to really implement artificial intelligence, machine learning for triangulation, then it is the questions that we ask and it is the data that we put together that becomes the most important, right? So I had this much, and this is what I wanted to cover today. I wanted to end with a video, and this video actually now takes us to the next level. I wanted to cover it earlier, but I thought this is the right place to do that. Let me go back to that place to cover up with the video. Yep.
Years, computer chips will cost as little as a penny. That's cheaper than garbage, cheaper than scrap paper. So computer chips will be everywhere and nowhere, including our contact lenses. So when we put on our contact lenses and blink, we will go online. And who were the first people to buy internet contact lenses? College students taking final examinations. This means that my students will blink, and they will not have to memorize all the things I've been talking about. This is going to revolutionize education, because we cannot force students to memorize things that they can simply blink and get. And then if you feel sick, you will blink and see RoboDoc. RoboDoc is artificially intelligent, talks to you in plain English or Russian or whatever, speaks any language, accesses the entire internet for sound medical advice, almost for free. This is going to revolutionize the medical establishment. We'll still have doctors, but doctors will use RoboDoc as an aid. And if you're in a car accident in a foreign country, you don't speak the language, you'll talk to your wristwatch and talk to RoboLawyer. RoboLawyer understands the law in any country, in any language. In fact, I personally believe that artificial intelligence, the robotics industry, will eventually become bigger than the automobile industry of today, because your automobile will become a robot. You will talk to it. You will argue with it. You'll have discussions with your car about the best route to take. And when you want to park the car, you simply tell your car, park yourself. And the car parks itself. This is going to revolutionize urban economics when you don't have to worry about parking anymore. And then the next organ to be digitized is the brain. You may not know this, but 2 years ago, scientists were able to upload the first memories. Memories can now be uploaded and downloaded. This makes possible BrainNet. BrainNet could be the next step in the evolution of the internet. Instead of zeros and ones, instead of text, you'll put emotions, feelings, sensations, memories. Teenagers will go crazy. Teenagers put happy faces at the end of every sentence. Why bother to do that when you can put the emotion of your first dance, your first kiss, your first whatever right there on the internet? And so in the future, when you walk into a room, you will mentally command the internet. You'll take dictation mentally. You'll turn things on, turn things off, communicate with other people. People will think of you as a wizard of some sort, mentally communicating with everything around you. That's BrainNet. And then biotech is being digitized now. We can create a human body shop. We can create from your own cells, so there's no rejection mechanism. We can create skin, bone, cartilage, noses, ears, blood vessels, heart valves, bladders, complete windpipes can be grown in the laboratory. The next organ to be grown, by the way, is the liver. So for all you alcoholics in the audience, take heart. We may be able to grow your next liver. So even the economy is now being digitized into something I call perfect capitalism. You see, capitalism is based on supply and demand, but you don't know who's cheating you when you buy something. You don't know what the profit margin is. In the future, your contact lens will scan everything in a store, tell you who's cheating you, tell you who has the best product, what is the profit margin on every single thing that you can scan with your contact lens. And so capitalism becomes perfect supply and demand. This means that there are winners and losers. The losers will be middlemen. Because why did Amazon become so big? Why did Airbnb, why did Uber become so quickly so large? Because they digitized the middlemen. So I tell my friends, if you want to become a billionaire, take an industry, take any industry, write down all the places where there's friction, where there is middlemen, where there's obstruction, where there's frustration. List all the places in any industry, digitize it, and you too could become another Amazon founder.
Thank you, Professor. In good futurism, that is a future with both inspires and terrifies. So thank you.
Years.
All right, that's what I had. And it was very aptly said, right? I mean, it gives you an opportunity, but it is terrifying also. So, and that's the opportunity for HR. Yeah, I open it up for questions and observations.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Suryanarayan. It was really very inspiring and terrifying too, because I think we are losing the human touch. And how do we get connected? For connection, we use technology and we use the basic human touch. So that's the dilemma, that's the paradox we all are facing in this generation. It was very nice to see the TAM model, which is very, very popularly used in various technology adoption measurements. And if this goes the way it is anticipated, what do you think that we had some years back, we talked about learning organizations, we talked about knowledge management, that all will lose its importance and share because it is already embedded in the technology. Everything will be recorded, everything will have. So what do you think will be the future for learning organizations such HRs, the professionals were talking about, and the knowledge management, where the whole world has spent lot of invested lot of energy and money too.
So good question, but I see this as a great opportunity. I mean, the concepts of knowledge management and learning organization actually continues. It is thus that we have better avenues to make it a more superior learning organization. I would say our learning organization, the paradigm was at the manager cognition level. It was about people, what they learned, their own bounded rationalities, and how they shared information. But with artificial intelligence and machine learning coming, there is an additional source of learning that is there, and hence the concept of triangulation that I brought out. So I think the learning organization is only going to become superior. The options available for an enriched knowledge management is also going to be more. The bigger change is how are we ready, how much are we ready to let go and embrace that and trust that is where the question is. The entire transition is about, do I think I'm superior, or do I think machines are an equal and integral part of the decision making? And how much we allow that is what the question is. And that is where the entire research and all the direction is moving towards.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. We have questions in the chat box. I will request Manisha to unmute and ask her question.
Yep.
Madam Manisha. Manisha, I'll read out her question, sir.
Sure.
How relevant digitization in competency mapping would be in the particular behavioral competencies?
Okay, so see, there are two parts to digitalization from a competency point of view. One is what I call is the visibility paradigm. Now, today what happens is the competencies are associated to the job and it is there. The point when it comes to is the scale, is to what is the visibility that I'm able to give to people of the competencies attached to the job role. Now, so the scale that digital technologies can allow you in terms of visibility of competencies, current role, bridge role, future roles, any role that I'm talking about. So it's like saying, in a manual world, I know what are the competencies associated to me. But suppose I want to trace out my entire career to say, I am what I am and I want to become a CHRO. The entire path of HR officer to CHRO has multiple bridge roles in between. What does it take? And the competency mapping and the visibility that you are able to give to people is much better than digital. That is one part. The second is the superiority of the search function. Now look at it from a manager point of view. I want to find out the right person for the right job. If it is not digitally enabled, then the knowledge and information of who is capable on what is limited to a set of people within a particular department or whatever is the sphere of influence and control. But when you digitalize it and you put it for common use, then resource management and resourcing, finding the right person for the right job, leadership, talent, fungibility across businesses, and what I can do becomes much better. So we fundamentally, technology is not telling you what competency, the job of what competency, what job is still the HR manager's job. But the aspect about visibility, the aspect about search, and the resource management efficiency that you build as a part of it, and hence the transparency and the walk the talk that we are able to do becomes enriched. And that's the piece that the digitalization helps you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I'll request our former president, Shri Indrapal ji, to give his comments.
Yeah, Dr. Suryanarayan, very, very terrifying presentation. It looks like that the whole thing will be managed by the bots and artificial intelligence and machine learning and so on. So in that case, where does an individual manager, fit in? I mean, I suppose the biggest challenge the managers would have to get their people do their discretionary efforts for winning in the marketplace. Because what we have seen so far, it looks like it is managing everything that is internal. We make the right choice, we select the best person, put him on the job and so on and so forth. But that's what somebody else can do also. So your competitor can do. So how would we manage our people so that they can win against the competitors' people and get us larger market share, more profits and so on and so forth. And for that, every time when we come across that our HR policies are the constraint, people don't like us, and all this kind of thing we hear. So how would that change with this digitalization?
So two parts to this entire argument. One is, yeah, bots are there and it is terrifying. But I must tell you, the cognition of the bot is to the extent of the learning that we build into it, right? I mean, we are still the people who run those algorithms, we create those algorithms and create the intelligence logic around that. So, and largely today, I mean, I don't know about the future, but largely today, the bots are where there is repetitive activity. So wherever there is repetitive activity, that is where the bots come in. Wherever there is existing information available and that needs to be disseminated, that is what the bot is taking over. We are actually, as humanity, undermining ourselves by continuously doing that job. So the opportunity for HR is to say, can I stop undermining humans? And can I allow these repetitive tasks to be done by the robots, and hence build those change management procedures, building those newer processes and newer learning mechanisms for people to scale up their thinking and work towards what we as humans are meant to be. And that's where the challenge for the HR manager is. So it's about how do you motivate your people to move out of the comfort zone of doing repetitive tasks, leave it to the robots and do what we are actually supposed to do. So that is the fundamental paradigm that we are going at. So that's the difference between this and well, the future we don't know. And as I see research, I mean, there is a lot of thing, and that's the terrifying piece of it, where, you know, it's said that probably cognitive intelligence will come to such an extent that in a meeting room tomorrow, you will probably be having a bot as a colleague. You don't know, but that is something that is an area that we have not visited, but that is, and that's the next challenge for. But today the challenge is about the comfort, coming out of the comfort zone and moving to the next level of thinking and not doing the mundane jobs. So that's my answer, Indapalji.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I like the way you had defined that what will be in future. Enablement will become experience and analytics will be required to be insights, more insightful, and other aspects also. We have many more questions. I'll request Tasneem to unmute herself and ask her questions. She has posted, I think, 2 questions. Tasneem?
Yes, Dr. Lagati. Thank you so much. And a very good evening to Dr. Iyer. My question to you, dear sir, is with education going virtual, with thousands of school and college students on online education, screen time has proved an opportunity for all. But with this boon is the underlying threat of cyberbullying, phishing, hacking. Any basic precautionary measure could you please highlight to avoid such security privacy attacks, or any link application which you can refer for our guidance?
So ma'am, I actually, I mean, was earlier thinking, should I cover it or not? But data privacy in itself and security itself is a big subject. And nowadays, the entire mechanism of data privacy and security have technological tools associated. So there is a separate science where there are tools that are available both at the information security. As I said, it's about, one is the information security, and there are technological tools that are available for that. But data privacy is more of employee rights, individual rights, and the consent from them. So actually, if you see a lot of organizations, if you see, there'll be something called cookies. There'll be a consent that will be there whenever you go to a website. It's a privacy notice, and it's about the consent that you take from people to say whether I can use your data for whatever purpose. So it's about transparency and being able to create the mechanism around that. So both of these issues, the information security and data privacy, are equally important. India is coming up with a new data privacy law. I think it is to be tabled and passed as a law. A lot of organizations are now hence using GDPR as a basis. GDPR is a very good framework. You should look at GDPR as a framework and implement the recommendations of GDPR, at least until the final Indian laws come into picture. And that gives a very good framework to be able to build in the data privacy laws within your own organization, or the compliances within your own organization.
Okay,
so
doctor, thank you so much.
So a summary, a mix of technological tools from information security, So whether the data masking as a technology, right, encryption as a technology. So there are various technologies. I mean, it's not a technology section, we're not going there. But more importantly, building in the data privacy framework, and GDPR can be one example that we can take. Summary. Sorry for the long answer.
Doctor, thank you so much. I've noted the pointers here. There's another question I'd like to include. A safe, user-friendly video teleconferencing software, Zoom, WebEx, BlueJeans. There are so many happening on the platform, but there are some people who are very skeptical in using certain softwares. And what would you recommend, Doctor?
So I should not be recommending anything ideally. But I must tell you that in these last 1.5 years, I have completely used the technologies that my customer uses. So in my organization, we use Zoom. In some of my customer places, somebody uses Microsoft Teams, somebody uses BlueJeans. So frankly, from a personal perspective, I've not seen a difference in any of those. Each of them have a different user interface and a different way, but they are all equally good. So
yes,
but preference to say which is good and bad, not the right forum.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Iyer. We have a few more minutes.
Sure.
But before we take up the second, I will request the participants in this call to please keep their videos on so that we can have photograph for this particular moment and share with you as the BMA smiling moments. And in between, I will ask Marlene to unmute herself and ask the question.
Yes, thank you, madam. I just wanted to ask about whether the human resource will get reduced with excessive digitization in terms of human intelligence being replaced by artificial intelligence. And will this result in leading to job losses?
Always a controversial question to answer, but I'll give it a shot. So my take in this entire thing is the technology and these digital technologies, particularly AI, have to be looked at as a supporting mechanism. I mean, I still believe technology is always an enabler, and human beings are the ones who take the call, who are the strategic decision. And as I explained, and I was answering Inderpal sir, it's not that the robots are going to replace us and the jobs are going to change. It's just that we have to come out of things that we are not supposed to do, allow the robots to do that, have that mindset to give it up, and challenge ourselves, move towards out of our comfort zone into doing things that we are supposed to do, which is skill building. As HR, if you ask me, our job is skill building. Our job is to give that experience to the employee. Our job is about aligning ourselves to the business and ensuring that the right skills, today's skills as well as future skills are available. I think that's where our focus should be, and we should use technology to be able to do that better and allow the mundane repetitive activities to be done by the robot. So to that extent, it's not about loss of job, it is about reconfiguring our jobs. I mean, this was the same question. If you ask some time back when railway reservation system had come, automation, and we moved from manual reservation counters to the digital counters, we said, oh, you know what, jobs will go. But actually jobs have gone up. Why have jobs gone up? Because when you use technology, the scale goes up. When scale goes up, consumption goes up, adoption goes up. And scale and the consumption, adoption goes up, the need for a higher scale of operation goes up, and you actually need more people. So you end up actually creating more jobs, but different jobs than what it is today. And that is how we should look at it. So technology should be looked at to drive that change in us and has to build scale in us. So in my opinion, it will create more jobs in some way, but different kinds of jobs.
Yes, as you mentioned that it will be thinkers, disruptors, analysts, and evangelists.
It's a different.
Such kind of jobs are going to come, and the mundane job of HR will, or any, for that matter, any vertical will go, and new jobs will definitely emerge.
And that is what has happened, Dr. Kavita. Yes. Whenever there has been a transition, industrial revolution brought about a new set of changes. Internet revolution brought about a new set of changes. Now artificial intelligence and robotics will have. So everything is a transition tipping point in the world, and each one will challenge the current jobs, but will create more jobs of a different kind. And it is about our adaptation to that, which humans are obviously very good at. And that's why I see a great promise in this.
Yes. Very true. We will take last question, sir. We are already at 6:30. I'll request Vikram Hande to unmute himself and ask the question.
Yes. Good evening, madam. Good evening, sir. Very nice session. Excellent insights you have given. I have one question. What KPIs organization should focus for success of digital transformation? As you said, companies has adopted digitalization, but new models are rare. Can you give insights on this?
Yeah. So from a KPI point of view, and I'll give a very short answer. In that model, I spoke about value, right? I mean, it's about outcomes and value realization. And for value, I brought about 3 levers. One lever is efficiency as a lever. Second is effectiveness, and third is service responsiveness. So, and that is where you got to go into effectiveness. So when I say efficiency, can I do more with less or with same? So has the number of people that I hire gone up? Has the time to hire gone down? Has the cost to hire gone down? Now, these are all efficiency metrics. So pick up every parameter and define your metrics around that and say, has digitalization helped me reduce the cost of hire? Has it improved? That is one angle. The second is effectiveness. And effectiveness is about saying, we'll have to mute Manoj. Yeah. So the second piece is about effectiveness. And effectiveness is about saying, am I doing things better than what I was doing earlier? So, and that is where perceptions do matter. And it's about people feeling with the digitization, has my experience changed? Has the candidate experience changed? Has the onboarding experience changed? Has my exit experience changed? Am I really being able to transparently view career paths, and is the organization walking the talk? So those are the experience metrics that you can put as a part of the effectiveness. And the third is the service responsiveness. Service responsiveness is the turnaround time. An employee has a question, 2 parameters, how soon I'm able to respond to it and in what quality. So personalization and contextualization, quality of the response, and the timeliness of response. These are the kinds of KPIs I'm telling at a higher level, and that is what is measurable in terms of value. And that's what digital transformation has to enable. If we are not able to measure that, then the adoption is not really good, and obviously people will be skeptical about future investments in HR technology. Yeah.
Manoj, unmute yourself and just give your comments or question.
Yeah, thanks. So Dr. Iyer, I have a little bit theoretical question, but since it is towards weekend, so what if employees never retire from the company? So what will be the challenge for HR?
Now, when you say never retire from the company,
they work for the life, like the Japanese people say, because many countries, they don't have a retirement life, retirement age. For example, in US, in Singapore, we still have the retirement age of 60, and many companies are thinking to increase it to maybe 65, 67. So I'm just assuming theoretically they don't retire. So how will HR?
Which is a possibility. And my HR answer to that is, we need to relook at our job architecture. And when I say relook at the job architecture, it's about redefining the jobs, right? I mean, beyond 60, do you want people to play the role of a consultant and an expert? How do you want to use them? That's the question, right? Whether they have to be in leadership roles all wrong, because the problem is, if after retirement also you continue to hold leadership positions, then you don't give opportunity to the next generation. You don't give opportunity for bringing in new ideas, because the strength of smaller ideas is always better than persistence of larger constancy of ideas. So if you want to bring in innovation into an organization, if you want to bring growth, you got to build in newer ideas. And if you want to bring in newer ideas, you have to leave leadership to the younger generation, which essentially then means the jobs have to be reconstituted for the senior professionals who would not retire, but their association with the organization and the jobs that they do, their roles have to be reconstituted. As long as we are able to do that and balance the 5 generations at work, and the way you are saying probably we'll have a 6th generation at work, then because I was assuming that people will eventually walk out after 70, but if you're going to do after 70 also, then the emeritus status people also, if they are going to continue, then we'll have the 6th generation at work. Reconstitution of the job architecture is fundamental, in my opinion.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. In fact, last week we had a Leader Speak series where Rajneesh Jain of RIL spoke about transformation and India's leadership. And as a subset of it, of digital transformation, today we have Dr. Surya Narayan Iyer speaking on HR transformations imperatives. And I think both these videos will be available on our YouTube channel. Request all of you to spread word about the YouTube channel of Bombay Management Association. There are more than 170 videos now on, and it's a great repository of knowledge and application of the knowledge in variety of areas of business and governance. My request to all of you is to subscribe to our BMA channel. Next week, we have a master class by Shri Ram Yogi of Larsen and Toubro. And we have on 20th an insurance conclave. You will all get the intimation of both these events in our WhatsApp group. It is also available on our site. So please visit, register, and please join us on these webinars in the next week. Wednesday Wisdom webinar and Friday Fundamentals Masterclass and the Insurance Conclave. Thank you, Dr. Surya Narayan Iyer, for that very enriching experience that you had given with the videos and the analysis that you had done with the research, which is very, very relevant and very contemporary, and your analysis about that. The question and answers have also given us a different dimension of thinking. There are students of human resource development management who are there in this particular call, and I'm sure they all have benefited by the thoughts that you have shared with us. I will thank Shri Bhaskar Joshi, who is past president and who was instrumental in inviting Dr. Surya Narayan for this webinar. And thank you all for joining us today. I'll thank Shri Indrapalji, Shri Santosh Tendulkar, our past presidents, my colleagues on EC, Vigyan Vermaji, and all other senior members of BMA, Dr. V.H. Iyer, Dr. Mehrotra, Dr. Pramod Solanki, and all others. Thank you very much for joining us. See you on Wednesday. And before that, my best wishes to all of you for the Independence Day. Celebrate the freedom, celebrate the Indianness. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll exit the call now.
Yes, yes, we can leave now. Let me close the meeting.